to share with you an upcoming book called The Strength of My Soul, Stories of Sisterhood, Triumph, and Inspiration. And I'm so excited about this anthology because this anthology is a collection of stories from 27 women, 27 amazing women from all walks of life. And they are sharing their stories with one common goal, and that's just to inspire you as women to live your life on purpose with purpose, and also to inspire you to never let your circumstances of your past dictate the terms of your future. So I'm so excited about these women who have willingly shared their stories with us, and I'm sure that this interview will bless you. So today I'm so excited to be sharing some time with one of our co-authors, Michelle Dowell-Vest. And I have to tell you, this woman is absolutely incredible. She is a mother. She's a grandmother. She is the founder of Girls Guide. She's also the co-owner and co-founder of Back to Us Radio Network. Not only that, she is a lover of humans, and she believes that healing happens best in community. So I'm so grateful for your time and your talent and your genius with us. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, SharRon. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this exciting book that's coming out this year.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I have to tell you, when I had a chance to read your story, the
hmm
word that comes to mind is the word resilience. I
Mm.
was just mesmerized and in awe about your past. When you think about your past, what word comes to mind that really captures the essence of your experience growing up?
God, that's a layered question, SharRon. I think kind of right along with resilience, but persistence. I think when you grew up the way that I did, you have to find this inner strength to keep persisting past, or just kind of pushing past some of the trials and triumphs, tragedies and trials that I had to endure as a child and even as a young adult, trying to navigate through a very adult experience. So I think just perseverance.
President, I have to tell
Mm.
you, I know that when people first read your story, they are going to not only be empowered but equipped. I think there's something when you feel and read that people have endured so much tragedy that makes you reach somewhere down in the crevices of your own soul and pull out your own strength. So I'm really excited about people reading your story. What's really interesting, I love the part about your mother and daughter relationship. And I
Okay.
think that that relationship is so pivotal in the lives of women because it's our first interaction with the world. But share
Sure.
with us about your relationship with your mother. I don't want to give away your whole story. I want to give you an opportunity to
Sure.
share it. So will you share that experience and how that shaped you, how that also shaped your ethos and your philosophy about life?
Sure. So I'm the second child of an addict, but really I was the oldest one at home because my mother had five children in total, an older sister that was placed for adoption by the state of California before I even was born. So in a sense, I was kind of like the oldest in the home, and so I was very much that responsible child, very much the person that needed to, keep it all together. I learned codependency from her. I learned I could talk about all the negative things that I learned from her and from that experience of being the child of an addict. But I think that what I learned most and what sits most prevalent in my experience and my walk is that I learned what I did not want to be. And I had to find the balance between being a slave to that and then also finding the strength in that. Because so often when we come through tragedy as a child, we spend so much energy and time, saying what we don't want to do and how we don't want to be like our mom, that we become, very encapsulated in that one definition of what our life can be, when really it's outside of that obligation to not be like your parent who wounded you, that you find strength. And so it was really when I said I'm not going to be dictated by trying to not be like her anymore, is really, I think, when my life kind of soared and when I found the biggest part of my healing.
Well, walk us through that process. I think so many times, many people live in their pain because the pain is
Mhm.
familiar. And even
Sure.
though it hurts, sometimes healing hurts more, because I think I tell my clients all the time, sometimes I have to cut you to cure you. And
Mhm.
so tell me, how were you able to understand that living in that confinement of your past was
Mhm.
really affecting you and making you live a truncated life? And how did you get out of that? What was the impetus? What type of skills and techniques did you use to navigate yourself from a place of
Sure.
pain to a place where you are, which is a place of incredible power? Tell us about that journey and what advice you
Sure.
can offer to other women.
So what I do know from very early on is that I'm very fortunate. The state of California intervened into my life, and I was a foster child. And part of being a foster child is that you are mandated to go to court, by the court, to go to therapy. And so I'm really lucky that during that process of being a foster child, of going from group home to group home, and prior to me getting married, because that's a whole nother, that's a whole other part of the story, is me getting married very young. But the first 13 to 14 years of my life, even though I was very rarely with my mom and I was constantly in foster homes, I had people, they were very key people in my life that cared about me, that made sure I got to therapy, that made sure that I had the tools to do the work, that made sure I understood what boundaries were, that made sure I understood the power in my no, and the power in my yes. It I was I know that I'm very fortunate in that way, because a lot of people don't have those resources. I don't know now if foster kids have access to those kind of resources in the way that I did, coming up 30 years ago. Um, so that really instilled in me this hunger for emotional health. And so I was constantly reading the self-help books and constantly, in therapy, constantly being self-aware. And I think that that's the big thing that, being in therapy so early got me, was the value in being self-aware and being able to kind of talk about what I was feeling and what I was going through, and not feeling like there needed to be shame in that. Um,
Mm.
so I think that for me, those things are really what kind of pulled me through that. And then as an adult, and some of the they say that you replicate the relationships you've had with your parents in your romantic relationships. And I saw that I did that over and over again by dating people who weren't good for me, who were abusive for me. And it wasn't until I really understood those patterns. It's like I knew, but I had to go through those things to really understood how they affected my life and what I needed to do to fix that within me. And I would say I really started to feel whole or human when I came out, because a big part of that, for the first 30 years of my life, I was struggling with the fact that I was gay, and I knew that I was gay, but I couldn't. I also was very active in my church, and so those two things, when they collide, they don't always give us the permission to be ourselves. So working in knowing that I need to live my truth, but then also being constricted by a belief system that really was not allowing me to do that. So when I finally decided, okay, look, I'm just going to come out, I'm going to be who I am, I'm going to start walking in my truth, it's like all these shackles just came off of me. And it gave way to other healings and truths in my life. So as an adult, as a grown adult, fully responsible for all of my choices, for all of the things that that I bring into this world, it wasn't until probably like the last 10 years that I felt that.
Wow, you have shared so many good nuggets, and one of the nuggets I'm going to unpeel that because there's so much good truth in there.
Sure.
What I really loved that you said, it was about you taking that and making it an investment. You had a hunger for health, you had a hunger for
Hmm.
happiness, you had a hunger for harmony, really, and that
Sure.
you really invested that time to really be self-aware and to do self-reflection. Based on your experience and knowing the value of self-reflection and self-introspection and self-acceptance, why do you feel that many women are reluctant to go on that self-awareness journey? What do you think that stops so many women from embarking on a journey of health and harmony? I would love to know your perspective since you've been through so much already in your
Yeah.
life.
I think the one thing that glares most at me is that it's a very painful process. When you open those cans of pain and you're going, okay, let me see what I can pull out here and fix. You have to be really, you have to come from a really brave place, and you have to have the tools. And remember I said that I had those tools kind of growing up. I had this foundation. Had I not had that foundation, I think that this would have been a very different story we'd be having. So if you don't have that foundation and you just kind of show up and go, okay, well, I know that stuff is not right in my life and I don't know how to fix it. Let me start, let me start talking about it. Let me start sharing, and let me just start going down this path of healing. If you don't have the tools to deal with that, or you're not getting help, or you don't have a set of friends that have your best interest at heart, that can direct you to people that can help you, if you're not in therapy, if you don't have a life coach, if you don't have a spiritual basis, if you don't have these things that ground you, that process can be very scary and it can be very painful. And so, and then if you have, and let's talk about, if you have a foundation of religion, my personal belief is that religion doesn't necessarily give way to those kinds of conversations and healing. And there's a lot of stigma when it comes to emotional health and healing and the way that you need to go about it. And so if you have those, if you have the fear and the pain, fear of the pain, and you've got this system behind you that tells you that, you just got to go lay it at the altar and give it to God. Well, that doesn't work, and that's not enough. And, if you've got those things working together, it can be a very difficult process. And if you don't have the tools, it's really easy to give up and to slip right back into those patterns.
Oh gosh, I am so happy that you talked about the church. I'm a minister, and it's so interesting. One of the challenges that I had dealing with my own wounds was people telling me, just go pray. My father's a minister, just pray. And I prayed myself into debilitating depression. I prayed myself into eating disorder that really controlled my life. And I kept on praying to the point that I had to leave church in order to have a relationship with God. I finally came back, but I needed to give myself permission to have that hiatus. I call it the holy hiatus, so I can really start having that relationship with God. My sabbatical, because I knew the rules, but I didn't have a relationship. And what I did have a lot of was a lot of shame. And I'm so excited so not excited, but really happy that you talk about shame. I want to talk a little bit about foster care and what happened when there was a lot of transition in your life, moving from one home to one home to one home to one home. And I want to talk about that because so many times I have some of my clients that tell me that instability and living in that consistent chaos and transition made them feel unbalanced so much in their lives that they have trouble dealing with stability even now. But if things are going well and things are going stable, they do something to disrupt it, to go back to this life of familiarity, even though it was painful and chaotic. Can you share with us a little bit about your experience in foster care and how you were able to find some centering in the midst of all that transition?
I think the big piece of luggage that I carried out of foster care was being a people pleaser. Because as a child, when you are kind of shuffled from one place to another, you learn really quickly how to adapt, and you learn really quickly how to get what you need, and you learn really quickly what the rules are. Because you're in survival mode all the time. And part of that survival is learning how to please people and give them what they want. And that shows up in a lot of different ways. And none of them are healthy. From, being in codependent relationships to being in inappropriate, no fault of my own, but being vulnerable to being molested, being vulnerable to abuse, whether it be mental or physical. You would think that foster care is this this safe haven for children, but oftentimes it's not. I mean, I can tell you stories about, being in foster care and it being worse than I was at my mom's house, which had to be pretty bad, because, living at home really wasn't a good thing for me. But for me, people pleasing, I did crave that stability. And so I think that that's part of the reason why I got married so young and really tried to keep my family together and tried to make that work. And that's kind of been the pattern in all of my relationships. I've always been, kind of family oriented until I got to that point. So let me say this, because it kind of goes into what my book is about, or what my chapter is about. I was very family oriented for the 5 years that I was married to my children's father. And then after that, it just became me trying to figure out and find my life. And so for during that period, that was a big part of my own trauma and healing, and going through what I needed to get to be a better person so that I could be a better mother, to get back to that place of being family centered and oriented, which is where, you know, I've been for quite a while now. But yeah, people pleasing, and I do agree with you that people who grew up in chaos have to create it because it's their normal.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's almost we create this cycle of pain unbeknownst to us. We're the conduit, and we don't see that we are complicit in our pain and our continued suffering. I want to talk a little bit about when you talk about getting married early to try to establish some sense of stability in your life. At what age did you get married, and can you share with us some about that experience being married and being a young mother, and how did you manage that the enormity of that situation without a mother, without being a mother yourself? So can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. You have to remember that I was the oldest in my family. So whenever I was home, I was always the responsible child. And so having that responsibility always laid on me anyway. I come from this belief you just got to do what you got to do to make it work. And that's kind of how I approached motherhood. I met my children's father when I was 13. He was 20. He was significantly older than me. We got married when I was 14 and he was 21. I touch a little bit in the book, or in the chapter, about how I've come to, I'm sorry, the dogs are barking. how I've come to my own place of peace with that relationship, because knowing what I know now about, about him, about his patterns, about abuse, about sexual predators, it was really a difficult, long line for me to really admit that if it was just like one incident where, you know, he had dated somebody who was younger, I could see that. But with that, he always dated women. And so I actually married somebody who abused me. And that was a very difficult realization to come to, because I was very aware of what I was doing. I married him and I had children by him, but I was also 13 and he was also 20. I was also a very vulnerable child at that point. He was also an adult. And so when you look at that, that took a while for me to kind of to put together, and it's just now that I'm finding peace about that. During the marriage, we were married for 5 years. He was emotionally abusive, and I had to just kind of make do and figure out who I was in that process, as a wife, as a mother, as a high school student, because I did finish high school. I did, you know, work full time. I just pulled it together in the best way that I knew how. And so I think when we got divorced, that was a big part of the rest of the story, so to say. Is just being, I was overwhelmed with responsibility, and I was overwhelmed with the way he treated me and the way his family treated me. And it's just the emotional abuse that he put me through, and the messages that he drove into my head about who I was and who my mother was, and how much we were going to be alike. Even though it was a lie, it became a self-fulfilling prophecy for me.
Sure.
Yeah.
And what were the messages that he told you that really affected your ethos and your self-perception? And how did you start to unlearn those negative messages? Or how did you remove that, what I call emotional clutter, out of the way, so that you had some clarity about your own beauty and your own significance in this world?
I felt, when I was closer to the end of our marriage, I felt like I was this bird in a cage, and I knew that one day I would be free. And I know it sounds so cliche, but I was like, I just got to get free from him. And he was very controlling in the sense that he made sure that I believed that I would not be able to take my children with me. He was very clear in that. He was very clear in just beating me down emotionally regarding my ability to mother, even though I was a great mother. He would tell me that I was just like my mother, even though I really wasn't like my mother. And that because my mother was who she was, that I was unable to provide adequate care for my children. It was that I was ugly and that nobody would want me, and who would want me with 3 kids. And it was just this, it's a typical stuff that men tell women when they're trying to beat them down. Plus the stuff with my mom. He would call me crazy, and it was just this barrage of junk that he gave me. And one day I just decided that if I had a chance to get free, that I would. And I had gotten a promotion. We worked at the same place, and I had gotten a promotion at work. And I was, 19? I had 3 children. I'd gotten a promotion to supervisor in this call center. I was doing considerably better than him. So I think that sometimes our financial ability to take care of ourselves gives us that courage sometimes that we need, because I felt dependent upon him. I mean, we got married when I was 14 and I wasn't able to work. So here I was financially independent. I had a car, I had the way, to take care of myself. And I just got tired. I just was tired, and I was no longer afraid of what tomorrow looked like without him. I was more afraid of who I would become if I stayed. So I decided that I would just leave had I the opportunity. We were at work one day. I was outside taking a walk because it was a gorgeous day. I needed a little bit of fresh air. The job was kind of stressful. And he sees me out the window, and he's like, "Get up here." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "I said, get back in this building." Like he was my father. That's how he spoke to me. So I just kind of looked at him and I rolled my eyes, and I kept walking. So he comes out of the building and he gets in my face like he normally would. And he says, "Look, I don't know what your problem is lately," because apparently I was becoming a smart aleck, and my britches were getting kind of big. He says, "I don't know what's with you lately, but if you can't be the kind of wife that I need and do what I say, when I say, how I say, then you give me back my rings and we can just call it quits." And it was that moment that it was literally a split decision that I had to make. And I said, okay. And I took my ring off and I gave it to him. I called my boss, who knew the situation. And I said, "I'm leaving my ex-husband. I need to take the rest of the day off. I'll be back. Give me a couple of days. I need to go situate myself." And then I never looked back, ever. It was the best decision I ever made.
Wow. What?
But from there, well, I knew I had that was my moment. Like I had to carpe diem. I had to seize that moment, or else I don't know that I would have that courage again to do it.
Wow,
Yeah.
Michelle, it's so interesting. People always try to say that they have courage. I think courage is something that you acquire, something that you earn when you go through challenging situations.
I agree.
And I just salute your courage in that moment. 19 years old, 3 kids, and you knew that you would be better by yourself without even having someone celebrate you and affirm you all that time in your life. It just really, really speaks to your inner power, something that what I call your gut glory, where you dig down and you pull it out. So when you left your children and you knew that you were making a decision to free yourself, that it would cost you spending time with your children, how did you reconcile that, and how did you deal with that loss of not being able to be in your children's life like you desired to be?
Sure. I knew that to walk away from him meant that I had to break serious spiritual and emotional ties with him. Not only would he not let me take my children, like physically not let me take my children, he had the familial support that I didn't have. It was just me. He had his mom, his dad, his sisters, his brother, everybody to support him. I just had myself. And they all, his sister was my best friend, and they all turned against me. Like there was literally no support there for me. So I knew that leaving him meant that I had to leave my children, and that was really difficult. It was literally the most painful situation I've ever been through in my life. And it set in motion 10 years of dealing with that guilt, and 10 years of not doing the right thing, and 10 years of dealing with what he shared with me constantly about being just like my mother, and owning that when I really shouldn't have owned that. And then deciding, this is fixable with my kids. And so there were 10 years where there was very minimal contact, where I was not there, where I talk about it in the book, where I because I needed to take care of self, and because I didn't always make the right decisions, I feel like, and to this day, I admit that I abandoned my children. So for 10 years, I dealt with that, and I didn't always deal with it in the right way. I moved to Vegas. He moved to Washington. I was in my 20s in Vegas. I had a good time. I wasn't. I was kind of recapturing my teenage years in my adulthood, because remember, I had been married from 14 to 19. So that stuff that you do as a teenager helps your development, that socializes you. I was doing that in my early 20s.
Sure.
So when I decided, kind of like I decided to leave him, I decided that I had to start to fix this with my kids. And it was a very slow process of opening dialogue. Part of my time in Vegas, I became really successful in the real estate business. And so I had the means to take care of my kids. And my two older children came to live with me when they were about 14 and 15. And since then, we've basically worked on our road to healing. My youngest son and he was very close with his stepmom, because I left his dad when he was 10 months old. And so and then he got remarried when my youngest was 3, and so his stepmom raised him, and I always honored that. Like I get that I left, I get that I made those choices, and I was happy that he had a stable mom in his life and somebody that loved him and cared about him. And so it's almost like I gave him up for adoption. And so now he's an adult, he's got his own family, and now we are have had some really heart-to-heart conversations and are on our way to repairing that relationship and building that trust. My older 2 children, my daughter, she's my best friend. Like, we literally are 2 peas in a pod, and that has been healed. But it was healed because we were really willing to take a look at the hard stuff and talk about it. And I had to own the pain that I caused. I had to own where I left her vulnerable, and where I caused some residual pain and habits that even to this day she still deals with. My oldest son and I, we have our challenges. You know, he's my middle child. He's the one that felt the divorce the hardest. He battles, undiagnosed mental illness and addiction himself. I'm constantly worried about him, but he is resilient also, and he's out there making his way in the world. And he's going to make it.
Sweetheart, I just am, Michelle, when I think about you and your willingness to share your story, the willingness to be authentic, I can't begin to tell you how many women are going to be healed who find themselves in your situation, because I really believe that something that you already said in your introduction in the book, when you describe yourself, that healing happens best in community. And I know one of the blessings that I've had in my life, when I came out and said, yes, I have depression, I have these issues, instead of feeling shame, I got all this well of support that just engulfed me, and it allowed me to start healing my life. So I just really salute you, sis, for your story and what you're doing. So right now, how are you, based on your relationship with your mom, because that daughter-mother relationship is so important. How are you cultivating that mother-daughter relationship, not only with your daughter, but with your female grandbabies?
Oh gosh, it was right before my mom passed away that I felt like I was able to forgive and to put away the anger and really see her for a woman that had her own set of pain that she came with, a woman who struggled her life, who did do the best she could with what she had. And I was able to see that I was so much fortunate than her, and that I had avenues of healing that she didn't have. She's also the child of an alcoholic, the daughter of actually 2 alcoholics. And my chapter is called Mitochondrial Semantics. It's complicated, and it comes from my belief that generational curses and pain are very cellular, and they follow us through the generations. And so when I follow back generations on my mom's side of the family, there is a lot of abandonment, a lot of addiction, a lot of pain, a lot of the things that are now surfacing in my life, right? But I have the tools and the vocabulary to talk about that, whereas my mom didn't have that. So I talk about that and with my daughter, and I give her space to be emotional about it, and I give her space to tell me that she's angry at me, and I give her space to tell me that she loves me, that we can make it, and I give her space to be her own woman and to have agency over her own life. And I I don't believe that, like, I always say that our children don't belong to us. They're just entrusted to us to raise, to teach, and then release. And so I've tried to do, even in the absence, I've tried to do the best that I can with that, where she feels like she is her own person and can make her own decisions, and that she's able to celebrate her life in the way that she wants to. And so I give her that permission, whereas I didn't necessarily have that permission. I had to find it, whereas I instill it from her, have instilled it from the beginning. To my granddaughters, it's like this whole other place, because they don't. I think what's happened is my daughter has stopped that pattern of abandonment. She's stopped that pattern of pain. So my granddaughters are coming up in this wonderfully loving home that it's not perfect, by any means, but there is this sense of security and safety that I didn't have, that my daughter didn't have, that we are committed to giving them. And even to my other grandchildren, they have wonderful parents. Even so, my youngest son, he's got one and one on the way. They're just the cutest couple. My daughter-in-law is just so progressive and amazing, and just like this free-spirited person who I adore. My oldest son's wife and their two children, even though he has the issues that he has, she's very committed to protecting her children and making sure that even though their father's not in their life right now, that they have what they need and they have the love that they need. So I think in this generation, we have stopped that for the most part, stop that generational curse of pain and abandonment and addiction, other than what I'm dealing with my son. But it's not trickled down to his kids yet. So as far as I can see, I mean, they do miss him. He's not always there. It's not always the most healthy, but she protects them so well, which is what my mother never did, that I honor her for that. She takes very good care of the grandbabies. And so in that, I think that my grandchildren just have a different viewpoint in life, and I'm very thankful for that.
Well, what a blessing. It's so important, I know, in my life and in your life too, that when we become self-aware, we can see patterns. I don't care if they're generational patterns, I don't care if they're behavioral patterns. And many times if we can see the patterns, we can see how we're complicit, so we can change. And I think the challenge is so many times to see the patterns, to want to do that work. Like you said, to have that hunger and that investment to walk down that sometimes painful path. And I always tell my clients, just because you're not talking about it does not mean it doesn't exist. You can only act like you don't know what you know for so long until it starts.
When everybody else sees it.
Yeah, everybody else sees it. I tell so many of my clients, oh, nobody can tell I'm hurting. I'm thinking you are a walking person of crying, of frustration, your personality.
You're like a blister about to burst.
Yeah. And we see it. And I tell people, so I welcome when people see my pain, because sometimes I have been so good at numbing and pretending that I don't know when I'm showing up in a non-authentic way. So I really admire what you say about providing that protection and boundaries, identifying where the issue is, and to address the issue with a sense of purpose and a sense of love. Something is so interesting that I want you to speak on for just a little bit, if you can, about the power of forgiveness. The power of forgiveness. In your story, I hear about the forgiveness that you had for your mom. What really resonates with me, Michelle, is the forgiveness that you gave yourself.
Sure.
So tell me a little bit about that towards of self-forgiveness, and what was your path to really forgive yourself so that you could embrace all that you were and embrace all that you were not, but to get to a place of self-love, self-understanding, and self-acceptance. What was that path to forgiveness like, that journey?
So one of the things that I am thankful that I took away from the church is a church that I attended for many years was a really good combination of therapy, because the pastor was a licensed practicing therapist, and spirituality. And so he would give late classes to people who were interested in facilitating counseling groups and addiction groups and stuff like that. So I was inundated or very involved in that whole process. And so one of the things that we talked about during that I've learned about was what the process of forgiveness actually looks like. Because I think that people don't forgive because they don't know what it is and how to get there, and that it's not just something you wake up and go, okay, I forgive you. It's actually a process that you have to work at. It's the decision to decide. It's working through that and actually dealing with what causes you the pain. And then it's the state of forgiveness that you actually can live in. And so, it's acknowledging that, for me, that first part was acknowledging that I can't heal, I can't do better for my children, I can't do anything in my life until I decide that I am worthy of forgiveness. Because if you don't, if you can't find the strength to forgive yourself, start dealing with your worth value, check your worth, check your value and what you think about yourself, and start there. Because when you start to believe that you're worthy of forgiveness, then you can start the process of forgiveness. And so, every time that I would make a decision that I felt was bad, or every time that a painful situation would come up or a painful memory, I would attack it. I would sit with it. I would try to reinterpret it, and then I would forgive myself for my actions there. And it was knowing that I didn't have to be perfect, and it was giving myself room to make mistakes, and it was giving myself permission to be human and to be emotional and to be me. To not feel like I was obligated to show up in life in a certain way. And I think that for me was the most important part, just knowing that I was human and that I was worthy of love, worthy of forgiveness. And once I figured that part out, the rest was just kind of a process for me of facing it, like facing what I needed to forgive myself for. And it's the same with my mom. When I realized that my mom was a person and that she was a wounded woman, I was able to just see her differently and see that she wasn't this monster, but that she was worthy of forgiveness and worthy of love, even if it was about my own freedom and finding release from the pain she caused me. So, I think that hope that answers your question.
It did. I too agree.
I tend to ramble sometimes.
You're not rambling. I am so enjoying you, and you are so blessing me. And just by talking to you, I feel like I'm about to write 3 sermons based on our conversation because what you're saying is so rich to my soul. So just thank you for that. I love when you say about forgiveness being freeing, because I think forgiveness is a liberating. It's a form of liberation that we give to ourselves. Yeah. So I really love that place which you said, the process of forgiveness, because it is a process. I love what my pastor says. He says forgiveness means giving up the past for a better future. Forgive, give up. And I really I appreciate your perspective on that. I want to say that at the end of your book, I love that you said that you were not going to try to tie it up in a nice little bow. I love that. And that you encourage people to sit in it and digest it. Talk about the importance of sitting in not sitting in your pain, but sitting in that experience so that you can heal from a place of power, from a place of self-love. Tell me why you did not want to say, and we live happily ever after, which is not the truth. So tell me about your perspective to end the book, to end your chapter in a realistic, honest way, a way that I know that women can say, you know what, that's my life. Because this happily ever after is not my reality. I don't understand it. But I love that you're giving women permission, or inviting them, so to speak, to grapple with that place of uncertainty and that place of getting to know and getting to understand. And tell me about that. How did you get to that place where you just said to yourself, I don't have to have a happily ever after, that I'm going to make a happily ever after, but that making of it is a process?
I think that as women, we're so pressured into projecting this perfect image out there, and especially for people who kind of have platforms, or who do things out in the public, or just don't live this very solo-centered life. I think that especially people like us, we have this pressure to always be on point, to always be perfect. And I have rejected that notion for a very long time, because I don't think that me pretending that my life is perfect helps anybody. It actually harms me. It's a lie. it doesn't do any good. And so if I wanted to share my story in the hopes of somebody connecting with it and seeing themselves in it and getting encouragement and being uplifted in it, then I had to be really honest about where I was. Because, you know, people, it would be so easy to find out otherwise, you know. If I were to lie, so why would I want to put myself through that? The fact is that it's not perfect. I'm battling issues with my oldest son that I wish weren't there. But you know what? That's my reality. And that's my journey right now. And so there's no reason I need to be ashamed of my journey and my son's journey and the things that we go through as a family. Because let's face it, everybody has something. Everybody has something that they're dealing with. And there are no perfect people. I wouldn't trust somebody that made their life look like it was wrapped up in this perfect bow all the time. I would think that they were lying. I would think that they were in denial. I would think that they're probably really in a lot of pain.
Yes, me too.
Yeah. So, you know, I just didn't want to do that. And the story that I tell is very personal, and I haven't told it to a lot of people. And there is the possibility that some people will judge me for it. And I just had to be okay with that. I had to be okay with what people would say and what they would think about me and how they may think differently about me. And then I also had to, in doing that, and in making that decision, I said, it's not perfect right now, and it never will be perfect, and I don't need to wrap it up in a bow. I learned a long time ago that, you know, some things can never be gotten over. Some things you have to walk through. And I think that's just a metaphor for life. Like, we're constantly walking through our life, and it's not meant to get over anything. It's meant to absorb and to experience and to understand and to accept and to forgive and to love yourself through it. And so that's been a principle in my life for a long time. I think a couple of years ago, I wrote a piece for Create Love, where I was talking about my gallery of memories and how I process things. And part of walking through that, part of healing myself and kind of walking through my own pain is sitting in the gallery of my memories, where I see all the frames on the walls of stories that have been told in my life. And it's my job to reinterpret what those frames should house, and how those lessons that come from those painful memories, how they should affect my life. And so sitting in that gallery is what I call it. I don't think that you can effectively heal from your pain unless you sit with it. Not dwell in it, but sit with it long enough to work through it.
I agree with you. And in that dwelling, and I love when you talk about perfection. I think perfection pollutes progress. And I tell my clients that all it does is to make you feel less than. And because perfection is an illusion anyway, it's not something that exists. You said something very important. When you talk about galleries and sitting in the gallery of your emotions. When you look in the mirror now, and you walk through your gallery, what do you see about Michelle? And what do you see for Michelle?
Gosh, I see this hall of memories, and all of them are great. Not because they represented this great, amazing time and everything was perfect, but because they've created who I am. And I'm thankful. I'm thankful for those because I'm at a really good place in my life. It's not perfect. It's not always ideal, but it is really good. And I'm healthy. I'm in love. My family is amazing. I've got great people around me. I've made good decisions about friends. I've made good decisions in business. I'm at peace. And so that's what I see. I see a journey to self. And I see love for that journey. And I don't see any regrets at all.
Wow. Well, I just tell you, your journey is blessing me, and I know it's blessing other women. So when you think about the strength of your soul, what was the strength of your soul that got you through the hardest times in your life? And what's the strength of your soul now?
I think resilience kind of goes back to what you talked about. Resilience and perseverance is what got me through. And now it's permission. It's permission. Permission to enjoy my life. Permission to love freely. Permission to be fearless. Permission to forgive myself, permission to take chances, permission to not be perfect, and permission to be what I know that I can be, which sometimes we battle. You know, we all have our own insecurities and things that, you know, those little voices from our past that tell us we can't do things. But, you know, 2016 is for me, is going to be my year of permissions to say yes to things that I may not have said yes to before. And so I'm challenging myself to do things that I haven't done, stepping out on faith on some things, and creating a life that I want to create, both in career, in friendships and relationships with my children. So, yeah, permission.
Permission. I love it. The strength of your soul is permission. So,
Mhm.
as our time together comes to an end, how can women
Yes.
stay in touch with you? How can they connect with you? I know that, you know, the strength of my soul, we will have some workshops, and I know women are going to flock to hear your story. Well, how can people connect with you after this interview so that they can hear more of your wisdom? Your wisdom, I tell myself, women wisdom wins. And
Yeah.
your wisdom is going to help someone win because it's helping me win just having this time with you today. So thank you for that. So tell me, how
Sure.
can we find Michelle and how can they connect Michelle so that they can continue be fed by your soul?
Sure. I'm real. I mean, I'm easy to find on the internet. You can simply Google me, but I think directly, you can go to my website, which is my personal blog, where I do a lot of my own writing. I do interviews. That's really where I celebrate community there, and that's at agirlsguide.org, spelled AGURLZGUIDE.org. I have, aside from the chapter that we're working on here, I've got a couple of books coming out in 2016. One is called Life Bites, and these are just little nuggets of wisdom that I picked up along the way, which actually will probably be a series of books, very short books that come out periodically, that are going to be self-published. I am working on a book, and maybe I'll call it Permission for My Daughter, or something similar to that, where I'm passing on advice to my daughter that I hope other women can gain from. And you can also find me on Twitter at a girls guide, AGURLZGUIDE, or you can Google me, Michelle at agirlsguide.org. Find me there. Lots of ways. And then 2016, I am opening up a brand new business I'm very excited about. I decided that I wanted to marry three things: what I love to do, what I want to do more of, and what I'm passionate about. And what I love to do is write, what I want to do more of is travel, and what I'm passionate about is inspiring people. And so I am starting a online travel magazine and agency that will encourage and empower people to travel more and often. It's very photo-centered. It'll be very empowering. So I'm taking kind of that empowering person that I am and applying it to the value in travel and how important it is to get away and to celebrate ourselves and challenge ourselves and to kind of get out of our own comfort zone and see the world in ways that empower us. And
Wow,
that's called
2016.
2016. And that's called City Nooks, CITINOOKS.com. We're launching, should be January of 2016.
Wow, let me tell you, I am just motivated just listening to you. And I know that people are going to be enriched by your offering. So, again, thank you so much, Michelle, for your time. Thank you so much for sharing your genius with this anthology, The Strength of My Soul, Stories of Sisterhood, Inspiration, and Triumph. Thank you so much for bearing your soul so that other women can win and grow. I thank you for that. That's such a gift. I believe sisterhood is a gift. And through us, we not only rise individually, but we all rise collectively. So thank you so much for your genius. I really appreciate you sharing with us.
Thank you, SharRon. I appreciate the opportunity to participate in this project. I'm very excited and here to support in any way that I can. I think this project is amazing, and I'm looking forward to the finished book.
Well, good.
Thank
And
you.
thank you so much, though. Thank you so much, my dear. And I look forward to doing some workshops with you. People have to hear what you have to say. So thanks again. Have a great, great evening. And thank you so much from the Strength of My Soul, Stories of Sisterhood, Inspiration, and Triumph. And we look forward to sharing our masterpiece with you. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.